Welcome back. The latest quarterly crime statistics show a decrease in most serious crimes compared to the same period last year. However, robberies at homes and businesses, cash-in-transit heists and truck hijackings increased in the country's urban centres. The stats reveal that cash-in-transit heists and truck hijackings surged by 60% and 32% respectively. To discuss the surge in crime and cash-in-transit robberies, we're joined now by security expert Rory Steyn. Rory, as always, thanks for your time. So, while lockdown saw a decline in the numbers of crimes reported, certain crimes are seeing increases. What could be some of the reasons behind that?
Well, good afternoon to you and everybody watching. I think it's pretty clear that the major reason for the spike, and there are many, but the major reason for the spike, and particularly those crimes, is the fact that people just don't have work. The economy has suffered. People need to feed themselves. People need to eat. People are angry at the government and at the system for even having been locked down, and caution is being thrown to the wind. The very fact that we're seeing these trucks being burnt at the rate that they are, and to the organizational level that we're seeing out there, people are taking brazen chances now. I don't think they necessarily fear law enforcement as much as they did before lockdown.
Rory, while I could understand that mass job losses lead to worsening poverty and possibly an increase in crime as a result of desperation, but what could be the reason behind the increase in violence used during the commissioning of these crimes?
I think, especially, and I'm talking about the Western Cape now, because we have this perception that Joburg is the crime capital of South Africa, and that is not the case. It is Cape Town. The most recent research there has shown that an access to alcohol, drugs and firearms is behind those spikes there. So I would put that forward as an overall reason for the increase in violent crime.
So just talking specifically about Cape Town now, in certain Cape Town suburbs and townships, the murder rate had more than doubled. And in the case of Bellville, the attempted murder rate had increased by a staggering 900%. Do we have the policing capacity to understand and deal with these urban increases in a targeted and strategic manner rather than our usual reactionary approach?
I don't think that we do currently, and I also don't think that the deployment of the South African National Defence Force is necessarily the answer. It could be a short-term solution or a stopgap measure, which is actually how I think it was initially meant or intended in the Western Cape. But there's no long-term sustainability in that. And again, if you read the research, it's very clear from the latest papers coming out that what is required is a total, very holistic community engagement, NGOs engagement, all the government departments across the board at national, provincial and local level, all of them getting involved and actually thinking through how best it is, to strategize against this crime wave. And I constantly beat this drum whenever I'm interviewed on ENCA, that it starts with the management of the leadership of our police, the management of our police officers and members, and then training. And I think that as the budget cuts bite, sadly, training suffers. The police are under such immense pressure. And as a former police officer myself, I know what that's like. We are flogging very tired, very exhausted, very overworked police officers. I ask myself whether they're getting sufficient rest and whether they're getting sufficient training. And we can't have police officers that were last trained in a specific discipline or to counter a specific threat 2 or 3 years ago, and without them having been trained in the latest threat. So, for example, having seen these spikes during and post, well, we're almost post-COVID, how much training has been targeted towards dealing with what we are now seeing? Because there's no question that the crime that our cops are facing has shifted. So I'm just asking one simple question. How is the training, how is the briefing, how has the management of the risks and threats faced by our men and women in blue changed? I mean, has it changed? So to answer your question, I don't think that we are ideally positioned to effectively police these latest threats and risks.
Rory, I want to talk to you about cash in transit heists specifically. We seem to have had the problem under control for a number of years, but incidents do seem to be increasing in the past few months. Is that the case? And do you think the modus operandi of these presumably crime syndicates has changed?
Well, to answer the question, certainly the spike is genuine. It's when you see an increase in the hundreds of percentage points, there is very, very real concern. Now, the thing about cash in transit heists is that it's not necessarily essentially a policing issue, because the policing of cash in transit heists is largely reactive, but all of cash in transit is I don't want to use the word perpetrated. It's conducted. All of cash that is being transported is conducted by the private security industry. And I think that's where the problem lies. The private security industry, especially in the cash handling space, has been targeted and infiltrated over the last number of years by organized crime. What do I mean by that? I mean, organized crime have identified security officers, or they've identified criminals to register as security officers. They've kind of defined a career path into cash handling companies, and they've just bided their time and waited. So it's the old adage, and we all hear this all the time, but it is the old adage of inside information. So if you know which route the big money truck, with the 30, 40 million rands worth of cash is going to be transported on, what time it'll depart and what time it'll be where, that information is gold to criminal syndicates. So I'm saying that primarily we need to probably have a look at the companies involved with cash handling, and we need a whole new approach there, because it absolutely, and I'm now, having been a cop for nearly 18 years, now I'm in the private security industry. So now I'm talking about my current and existing colleagues in the private security space. It absolutely slays me that people will wake up in the morning and they'll go and sell out their colleagues, knowing that those colleagues that they've sold out will have to face armed gangs with armor-piercing AK-47 rounds. Some of them will lose their lives, but they are willing to sell that information to a criminal syndicate. It is evil, and we need to deal with it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time. That was security expert Rory Steyn.